The Galactic Council chambers stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its walls reflecting the forms of representatives from 47 different worlds. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the human podium, her hands steady despite the weight of what was about to happen. Around her, alien voices whispered in languages that had evolved on worlds she had never seen, under stars that Earth's astronomers had only recently learned to name. The Vorthak delegate, a creature that resembled a walking tree with too many eyes, spoke first. Its voice carried the authority of a species that had ruled the Outer Rim for 12,000 years. The human species has proven itself unsuitable for membership in this council. Their aggressive nature, their tendency toward violence, and their complete disregard for established galactic law make them a threat to civilized space. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. 3 years of careful diplomacy, 3 years of proving humanity's worth, and it all came down to this moment. The humans had done everything right. They had shared their technology freely, offered aid to struggling colonies, and even helped resolve border disputes between species that had been fighting for centuries. None of it mattered now. The Kalari representative slithered forward on its multiple legs, its blue-scaled head swaying with each word. The incident at Proxima Station cannot be ignored. 3 human vessels opened fire without provocation, destroying a peaceful trading post and killing over 200 innocent beings. "Those were pirates," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chamber's acoustics. "We have provided complete evidence that those ships were stolen from our merchant fleet. The real human vessels were found weeks later, their crews murdered, and their identification transponders removed." The Etherian delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, flickered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement. "Evidence can be manufactured, Ambassador Chen. The pattern is clear. Wherever humans go, conflict follows. Your species has been at war with itself for its entire recorded history." Sarah's diplomatic training kicked in, keeping her voice level despite the fury building in her chest. Every species in this chamber has a history of conflict. The Vorthak conquered 14 systems before joining the Council. The Kalari fought a civil war that lasted 3 centuries. The difference is that we learned from our mistakes. "Did you?" The question came from High Counselor Zephyrian, whose species had founded the Galactic Council 8,000 years ago. His form was humanoid but stretched tall and thin, with skin that shifted between silver and gold depending on the light. "Your military ships carry weapons capable of cracking planets. Your colonies spread faster than any species we have ever encountered. You consume resources at rates that would bankrupt entire star systems." The accusations kept coming, each one building on the last. Sarah realized that this wasn't really a trial or a hearing. The decision had already been made. The other species had grown afraid of humanity's rapid expansion and technological progress. In just 50 years since first contact, humans had established colonies on 37 worlds and built a merchant fleet that rivaled species with millennia of spacefaring experience. "The Council has reached its decision," High Counselor Zephyrian announced. "Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human vessels are ordered to withdraw from Council space within 30 standard days. Any human ship found in Council territory after this deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." The chamber erupted in a symphony of alien voices, some expressing approval, others murmuring what might have been concern. Sarah stood perfectly still, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Humanity had just been cast out of galactic civilization, branded as a threat to peace and stability. As the session ended and the alien delegates began filing out, the Altarian ambassador approached Sarah's podium. The Altarians were one of the few species that had consistently supported human membership in the Council. Their representative, a graceful being with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like starlight, spoke in the clicking language that Sarah had spent months learning. "I am sorry, Ambassador Chen," she said, her translator rendering the words in perfect English. "Many of us tried to prevent this outcome. The fear of your species runs deeper than logic or evidence." Sarah nodded, appreciating the gesture even though it changed nothing. "Thank you, Zara. Your friendship has meant more than you know." "What will humanity do now?" Zara asked, genuine concern in her multifaceted eyes. Sarah straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of representing her entire species. "We'll do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We'll survive, and we'll prove them wrong." The journey back to Earth took 6 weeks through the network of hyperspace gates that connected the galaxy's inhabited systems. Sarah spent most of that time composing her report, knowing that every word would be analyzed by the United Earth Government and the Colonial Defense Force. By the time her ship reached Sol system, the news had already spread through every human settlement. The emergency session of the Earth Senate convened within hours of Sarah's arrival. The great dome of the Senate building in Geneva housed representatives from every human world, their faces grim as they listened to her report. Chancellor Martinez, a veteran of humanity's first contact protocols, asked the question that everyone was thinking. "What are our options, Ambassador? Can we appeal this decision?" Sarah shook her head. "The Council's decision is final. We have 30 days to withdraw all human presence from their space. Any ship that remains will be destroyed without warning." Senator Williams from the Luna colonies leaned forward. "What about our trade agreements? Our mining rights in the Vega system? We have legitimate business interests throughout Council space." "All of it ends in 30 days, Sarah replied. "The Council has made it clear that they consider us a threat to galactic stability. They want us gone completely and permanently." The chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed the implications. Humanity had built its interstellar civilization on trade with other species. Their technology, their resources, their very expansion into the galaxy depended on the relationships they had carefully cultivated over 5 decades. Now all of that was gone. Admiral Harrison of the Colonial Defense Force stood to address the chamber. His uniform bore the scars of humanity's first encounters with hostile alien species, back when they were still learning that not every civilization was peaceful. "If I may, Chancellor, the Council's ultimatum gives us an opportunity to reconsider our strategic position." Chancellor Martinez gestured for him to continue. "Explain, Admiral." Harrison activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's inhabited regions. Human settlements appeared as blue dots scattered throughout what had been Council space, while the Council worlds glowed in various other colors. "For 50 years, we have played by their rules, accepted their restrictions, and limited our growth to avoid threatening their established order. We have been respectful guests in a galaxy that they claim to own." The Admiral's words carried a weight that made several representatives shift uncomfortably. "But this galaxy doesn't belong to the Council. There are hundreds of uninhabited systems, thousands of worlds suitable for human colonization, resources beyond anything we could exhaust in 1,000 years. The Council has kept us confined to a small fraction of what's available because they feared what we might become if we were allowed to reach our full potential." Senator Kim from the Mars colonies raised her hand. "Are you suggesting we ignore the Council's authority completely?" Admiral Harrison's smile was cold. "I'm suggesting that they've just removed any obligation we had to respect that authority. They want us out of their space? Fine, we'll build our own space." The debate that followed lasted for 18 hours. Some representatives argued for attempting to negotiate with individual Council species, hoping to find allies who might lobby for humanity's readmission. Others suggested compliance with the ultimatum, followed by a gradual rebuilding of relationships over decades or centuries. But as the hours passed, a different consensus began to emerge. The more the representatives discussed their options, the more they realized that the Council's decision might actually be a gift in disguise. Humanity had been holding back, constraining its natural expansion to avoid seeming threatening. Now they were free to pursue their destiny without apology or restraint. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, director of the Colonial Development Authority, presented the case that would ultimately shape humanity's response. Her holographic display showed resource surveys and colonization assessments that had been gathering dust in government archives. "The Council never allowed us to expand beyond a certain rate," she explained to the assembled representatives. "For every new colony we established, we had to provide detailed reports, environmental impact studies, and cultural sensitivity assessments. We were limited to 3 new settlements per year, and only in systems that the Council deemed suitable for human habitation." She manipulated the display to show vast regions of unexplored space. "But we've been conducting surveys on our own. There are over 200 systems within 50 light-years of existing human colonies that could support major settlements. Dozens more with resources that could fuel an industrial expansion beyond anything in recorded galactic history." The representatives stared at the display in amazement. 150 billion humans lived in the current colonial network. a number that had seemed enormous when compared to the billions more who still called Earth home. But the potential shown in Dr. Kane's survey suggested that humanity could support 1 trillion citizens or more within a single generation. Chancellor Martinez asked the question that would define humanity's future. Doctor, in your professional opinion, how long would it take to establish a fully independent human civilization, one that could not only survive without council trade, but potentially challenge their dominance? Dr. Kane's answer sent a ripple of excitement through the chamber. With our current technology and resources, we could establish 50 major colonies within 5 years. Each of those colonies could become the center of its own expansion network. Within 20 years, we could have a network of human worlds that dwarfs the Council's entire civilization. Admiral Harrison nodded approvingly. And with the industrial capacity that Dr. Kane is describing, we could build a military force that would make the Council think twice about any future threats. The vote, when it finally came, was unanimous. Humanity would comply with the Council's ultimatum, but not in the way their former allies expected. Every human ship, every colonial outpost, every research station in Council space would be evacuated within the 30-day deadline. But instead of retreating in defeat, humanity would use this exile as the foundation for something unprecedented in galactic history. The Exodus Protocol, as historians would later call it, began within hours of the Senate's decision. Every human ship capable of interstellar travel received new orders. Military vessels that had been patrolling Council borders turned toward unexplored regions of the galaxy. Merchant ships loaded with civilians and supplies headed for survey targets that had been waiting decades for development. Even the massive industrial platforms that had been mining asteroids in Council systems began the complex process of relocation. Sarah Chen found herself appointed as the first director of the Independent Human Territories, a position that effectively made her the foreign minister for a civilization that didn't yet exist. Her first official act was to send a message to every Council species, delivered simultaneously to their homeworlds and their representatives. The human species accepts the Council's decision to terminate our membership, her message began. We will comply fully with the withdrawal deadline and remove all human presence from Council space as requested. We wish the Council continued prosperity and peace. The message continued, but its tone shifted subtly. Humanity will pursue its own path among the stars, guided by the principles of freedom, cooperation, and respect for all sentient life. We remain open to future dialogue with any species that shares these values. However, we will no longer constrain our growth or our potential to accommodate the fears of others. The final paragraph carried an edge that made several Council members uncomfortable when they received it. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us. We trust that the Council will remember this truth, and that future interactions between our peoples will reflect mutual respect rather than the prejudice and fear that led to this unfortunate decision. As the first wave of evacuation ships departed Council space, carrying hundreds of thousands of humans toward their new destiny, the Council began to realize that their solution to the human problem might have created a far greater challenge than anything they had originally feared. The Vorthak delegate, reviewing intelligence reports from the Outer Rim, was among the first to understand the magnitude of what they had unleashed. Human ships were appearing in systems that no other species had even surveyed. Colonial transports were heading for worlds that the Council had deemed too dangerous or too remote for settlement. Most disturbing of all, massive industrial ships were moving toward resource-rich systems that the Council had been saving for future development. High Counselor Zephyrian called an emergency session as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. "What have we done?" he asked the assembled representatives, his silver skin flickering with patterns that indicated deep concern. The answer would become clear in the months and years that followed, as humanity's exile transformed from a punishment into the greatest expansion in galactic history. The Council had intended to contain a threat. Instead, they had set it free to grow beyond anything they had ever imagined. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching her navigation display track 17 different colony ships as they approached the Kepler 442 system. 3 months had passed since the evacuation from Council space, and humanity's expansion into the Outer Rim had exceeded every projection. The system ahead of them represented humanity's 15th new colonial target, a triple-star configuration with 6 potentially habitable worlds that the Council had never bothered to survey. "Captain, we're receiving telemetry from the advanced scouts," reported Lieutenant Chen, her fingers dancing across the sensor controls. "All 6 worlds show positive indicators for human settlement. The 3rd planet has a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere and liquid water oceans. The 5th world appears to be a frozen ice planet with massive mineral deposits. The 2nd planet is showing signs of geothermal activity that could support underground colonies." Maria nodded, feeling the familiar excitement that came with discovering a new home for humanity. In the 3 months since leaving Council space, human survey teams had identified over 40 systems suitable for immediate colonization. The speed of their expansion was unprecedented in galactic history, made possible by decades of technological advancement that the Council had never fully appreciated. "Any signs of existing civilization?" Maria asked, following protocols that had become standard for all human exploration missions. "Negative, Captain. No artificial structures, no electromagnetic signatures, no signs of spacefaring technology. The system appears to be completely uninhabited." Maria activated the communication array that would carry her voice to the 17 colony ships following in her wake. Each vessel carried between 10 and 15,000 colonists, along with the prefabricated infrastructure needed to establish a functioning settlement within months of landfall. "Colony Fleet 7, this is Captain Santos. We have confirmed positive conditions for immediate settlement. Begin deployment protocols for colonies Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Industrial teams should focus on the mineral-rich outer worlds, while agricultural specialists evaluate the fertile continents on Kepler 442c. The response came from Admiral Rebecca Walsh aboard the colony command ship UES New Horizons. "Confirmed, Captain Santos. We'll have the first settlements operational within 6 weeks. How are the other expansion fleets performing?" Maria pulled up the strategic overview that showed human expansion across a 50-light-year radius from their former Council territories. The numbers were staggering. In 3 months, humanity had established preliminary colonies on 28 worlds, with another 15 systems under active survey. The refugee population that the Council had expected to struggle for survival was instead thriving in regions of the galaxy that no other species had ever seriously considered for settlement. "Fleet reports are all positive, Admiral. Colony Fleet 3 has established a major industrial base in the Tau Ceti system. Colony Fleet 5 has discovered massive rare earth deposits on 3 different worlds in the Wolf 359 region. Colony Fleet 12 has found what appears to be a natural hyperspace anomaly that could cut travel time to the galactic rim by 60%. Admiral Walsh's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "The Council wanted to isolate us from galactic civilization. Instead, they've given us the opportunity to build our own." The truth of that statement was becoming clearer every day. Freed from Council restrictions on expansion rates and settlement patterns, humanity was spreading through space at a pace that would have been impossible under their former constraints. The 37 worlds that humans had occupied during their 50 years in the Council represented less than 5% of their potential colonial footprint. Dr. James Wright, the chief xenobiologist for Colony Fleet 7, interrupted Maria's thoughts with an urgent communication from his survey shuttle. "Captain Santos, I'm detecting something unusual on the 4th planet. It's not showing signs of current habitation, but there are definitely artificial structures down there." Maria felt her pulse quicken. Discovering evidence of alien civilization was both exciting and potentially dangerous. Humanity's expansion had been based on the assumption that they were moving into largely empty regions of space. Finding an unknown species could complicate everything. "What kind of structures, Doctor?" "Large-scale construction, definitely technological in origin, but they appear to be ancient, possibly abandoned for thousands of years. Captain, you need to see this. I'm transmitting visual data now." Maria's main screen flickered and then displayed the surface of Kepler 442d. The planet appeared to be a barren world with a thin atmosphere, its surface scarred by eons of meteor impacts. But rising from the rocky terrain were structures that defied easy explanation. Massive towers stretched toward the sky, their surfaces covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow even in the static images. Between the towers, broad platforms supported what appeared to be the remains of a vast technological complex. "How large is the site, Doctor?" The central complex covers approximately 200 square kilometers. But Captain, that's just the beginning. I'm detecting similar structures at 17 other locations across the planet's surface. This world was once home to a major technological civilization. Maria made the decision that would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. Abort the colony deployment for Kepler 442d. That planet is now classified as an archaeological site. Dr. Wright, I want a full survey team on the surface within 12 hours. If we've found evidence of an extinct alien civilization, we need to understand what happened to them. The investigation that followed would prove to be one of the most significant discoveries in human history. Dr. Wright's team, supported by specialists from 3 different colony ships, spent 2 weeks exploring the ruins on Kepler 442d. What they found challenged everything humanity thought it knew about galactic history. The alien structures were not just ancient, they were impossibly old. Carbon dating and spectral analysis suggested that the civilization responsible for their construction had fallen over 50,000 years ago, long before any of the current council species had achieved spaceflight. The technology they had employed was advanced beyond anything in the known galaxy, featuring energy systems and material sciences that human scientists could barely comprehend. But the most shocking discovery came when Dr. Wright's team managed to access what appeared to be a data storage facility buried beneath one of the central towers. The alien records were encoded in a mathematical language that took the team's xenolinguistics experts 3 days to crack. When they finally translated the first files, the implications sent shockwaves through the entire human colonial network. The extinct aliens called themselves the predecessors, and according to their records, they had once ruled a galactic empire that spanned over 10,000 star systems. Their technology had been based on principles that the current galactic civilization had never discovered, allowing them to manipulate space and time in ways that seemed almost magical. They had built gateways that could transport matter instantaneously across thousands of light years, factories that could convert stellar energy directly into any desired material, and defensive systems that could render entire star systems impregnable to outside attack. The records also revealed why the predecessors had fallen. They had not been destroyed by war or natural disaster, but by their own success. As their empire expanded and their technology advanced, they had grown complacent and divided. Different factions within their civilization had pursued different paths of development, eventually fragmenting into competing groups that fought a series of devastating civil wars. The final conflict had lasted only a few decades, but it had been so destructive that it had rendered most of their former territory uninhabitable and wiped out their species entirely. Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's chief xenoarchaeologist, made the discovery that would change everything. Deep in the predecessor data archives, she found detailed maps of their former territory. The star systems they had once controlled covered roughly 60% of what was now known space, including virtually every region where humanity was currently establishing its new colonies. Captain Santos, Dr. Kim reported during her briefing to the Colonial Command structure. According to these records, humanity is not just expanding into empty space. We're reclaiming territory that was once part of the greatest civilization in galactic history. Admiral Walsh, participating in the briefing via quantum communication from her position near the Kepler 442c colony site, asked the obvious question. Doctor, are there other predecessor sites in our target systems? Yes, Admiral. The records indicate major installations in at least 12 of the systems we've already begun colonizing, and preliminary installations in most of the others. If these maps are accurate, humanity is sitting on top of the largest cache of advanced alien technology in the galaxy. The implications were staggering. The technology gap between humanity and the Council species had been significant but not insurmountable. The gap between current galactic civilization and the predecessors was so vast that it might as well have been measured in geological epochs. If humanity could reverse engineer even a fraction of predecessor technology, they would become the dominant power in the galaxy almost overnight. Admiral Harrison, monitoring the briefings from Earth, made the decision that would define humanity's future strategy. All colonial fleets are to prioritize archaeological surveys in their target systems. Any predecessor sites are to be secured immediately and investigated by our best scientific teams. This technology could be the key to ensuring that humanity never again faces the kind of threat we encountered from the Council. The search for predecessor technology became humanity's primary focus over the following months. Colonial engineers worked alongside xenoarchaeologists to explore ruins that had been abandoned for millennia. The discoveries came in a steady stream that kept human scientists scrambling to understand what they were finding. On Kepler 442c, the agricultural colony discovered a vast underground complex that appeared to have been a research facility dedicated to biological engineering. The predecessors had developed techniques for modifying organisms at the genetic level that made human biotechnology look primitive by comparison. They had created plant species that could grow in pure vacuum, drawing nutrients directly from cosmic radiation. They had engineered microorganisms that could break down any form of matter and reassemble it into useful materials. In the Tau Ceti system, human miners exploring what they thought were natural caves discovered a predecessor manufacturing facility that stretched through the planet's entire crust. The machinery was still partially functional after 50,000 years, powered by some form of zero-point energy that human physicists were frantically trying to understand. Initial tests suggested that the facility could produce materials with properties that defied conventional physics, including metals that were stronger than any known substance and crystals that could store energy densities approaching those found in antimatter. The Wolf 359 expansion found what appeared to be a predecessor military base, complete with weapons systems that had been designed to crack planets and defensive shields that could theoretically withstand the direct impact of a supernova. The base's command center contained tactical databases that detailed military strategies and technologies far beyond anything the current galactic powers possessed. But the most significant discovery came from Colony Fleet 12's investigation of the hyperspace anomaly they had detected. What human scientists had initially assumed was a natural phenomenon turned out to be the remains of a predecessor transportation network. The anomaly was actually a damaged gateway that had once connected to a network spanning the entire galaxy. According to the technical specifications recovered from the site, a functional predecessor gateway could transport entire fleets instantaneously across distances that would take conventional ships years to traverse. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, now serving as Director of Predecessor Studies, presented her preliminary assessment to the human leadership during an emergency session convened 4 months after the initial discovery. The predecessors were not just more advanced than current galactic civilization, she explained to the assembled colonial governors, military commanders, and scientific directors. They had transcended the limitations that currently constrain all spacefaring species. Their technology was based on fundamental principles that we're only beginning to understand, but the implications are clear. If we can successfully reverse engineer and adapt their discoveries, humanity will possess capabilities that no other current species can match. The audience listened in fascination as Dr. Kane outlined the scope of what they had discovered. Energy systems that can tap directly into the quantum vacuum, manufacturing techniques that can produce materials with programmable properties, transportation networks that make interstellar distance irrelevant, defensive technologies that could protect entire star systems from any conceivable attack. Chancellor Martinez, participating from Earth via quantum communication, asked the question that everyone was thinking. Doctor, how long will it take us to develop this technology to a practical level? Dr. Kane's answer would shape humanity's strategy for the next decade. With our current understanding and the resources we're devoting to the research, we could have basic applications of predecessor energy technology within 2 years. Transportation systems might take 5 years to develop. Complete mastery of their manufacturing techniques could take a decade or more. Admiral Harrison's response was immediate. Then we need to accelerate our expansion to secure as many predecessor sites as possible before anyone else discovers what we've found. The Council thought they were exiling a troublesome species. They have no idea that they've just given us access to the keys of galactic supremacy. The transformation of humanity's colonial strategy began immediately. Instead of establishing traditional settlements focused on agriculture and basic industry, human colonies became research stations dedicated to unlocking predecessor secrets. The greatest minds in human science were recruited for the expansion fleets. while military forces were reorganized to protect archaeological sites rather than simply defend colonial territories. As reports of humanity's rapid expansion began reaching Council space, the alien leadership started to realize that their solution to the human problem might have been a catastrophic miscalculation. Intelligence reports described human colonies appearing in regions of space that were supposed to be impossible to settle, industrial facilities that seemed to violate known physical laws, and most disturbing of all, energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. High Counselor Zephyrian convened an emergency session to address the growing concern about human activities in the Outer Rim. Our scouts report that human expansion has exceeded every projection. They have established over 50 major settlements in less than 6 months. Their industrial capacity appears to be growing at rates that should be impossible with known technology. The Vorthak delegate, whose species had been among the strongest advocates for human expulsion, expressed the fear that was beginning to spread through the Council. What if we have made a mistake? What if forcing them out of our space has allowed them to become something more dangerous than we ever imagined? The question would prove prophetic. As humanity delved deeper into predecessor technology and began adapting it to their own purposes, they were becoming something unprecedented in galactic history, a species with the potential to surpass even the greatest civilizations of the past. The Council's exile had not eliminated a threat. It had created the foundation for an empire that would soon challenge everything they thought they knew about power in the galaxy. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the control room of the newly constructed predecessor research station on Kepler 442c, watching as his team prepared for the most ambitious experiment in human history. 18 months had passed since the first discovery of predecessor technology, and human understanding of their ancient achievements had advanced far beyond what anyone had thought possible. The device before them represented the culmination of that research, a functional reconstruction of a predecessor manufacturing system that could theoretically create materials that existed nowhere else in the known universe. "All systems are showing green, Doctor," reported Chief Engineer Lisa Park, her hands moving across control interfaces that combined human electronics with predecessor quantum manipulators. "The energy matrix is stable, and the quantum substrate is ready for pattern imprinting." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. The experiment they were about to conduct would determine whether humanity could truly master predecessor technology, or if they were simply stumbling around in the remnants of a civilization too advanced for them to comprehend. If it succeeded, humanity would possess manufacturing capabilities that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. If it failed, the explosion would likely vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius. "Initiate the manufacturing sequence," Marcus commanded, his voice carrying across the research station to teams monitoring from secure bunkers scattered across the planet's surface. The predecessor machine hummed to life, with a sound that seemed to vibrate through dimensions that human ears weren't designed to perceive. Energy patterns that defied conventional physics flowed through crystalline conduits, while matter converters began breaking down raw materials at the subatomic level and reassembling them according to specifications that had been encoded into the quantum substrate. The target for their first test was ambitious but practical, a hull material for starships that would be stronger than any substance currently known to science, while remaining light enough for practical construction. The predecessor databases had contained detailed specifications for such materials, along with the theoretical framework needed to produce them. The question was whether human technology could successfully interface with predecessor manufacturing systems. For 3 hours, the machine worked with the precision of a process that had been perfected over millennia. Energy readings fluctuated in patterns that suggested the manipulation of forces that human science had only recently learned to detect. The quantum substrate glowed with colors that had no names in any human language, while the matter converters processed raw materials with efficiency ratings that approached 100%. When the manufacturing cycle finally completed, the result exceeded every expectation. The test sample was a cubic meter of material that looked like crystallized starlight but felt solid and warm to the touch. Initial scans revealed properties that shouldn't have been possible. The material was simultaneously harder than diamond and more flexible than the finest synthetic polymers. It could conduct electricity with perfect efficiency or block electromagnetic radiation completely, depending on how its quantum structure was configured. "Doctor," Engineer Park said, her voice filled with awe. "This material is registering strength measurements that are off our instrument scales. According to the theoretical calculations, a starship built with this hull material could fly directly through a star's corona without taking damage." Marcus stared at the sample, understanding that they had just crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. Humanity now possessed the ability to create materials that no other galactic civilization could produce or even comprehend. The implications for shipbuilding, construction, and military applications were staggering. "Prepare a full report for Admiral Harrison and the Colonial Council," Marcus ordered. "Include complete specifications for scaling up production. If we can build ships with this technology, we're going to need a lot more than one test sample." The success at Kepler 442c was just one of dozens of breakthroughs occurring across the expanding human colonial network. At the Tau Ceti facility, Dr. Jennifer Liu's team had successfully activated a predecessor energy system that could generate power levels equivalent to a small star, while occupying a space no larger than a standard shipping container. The technology was based on principles that human physicists were calling dimensional tap, a process that drew energy directly from the quantum vacuum without violating conservation laws. In the Wolf 359 system, military engineers working with Dr. Chen Rodriguez had reverse-engineered a predecessor defensive system that could project shields capable of deflecting attacks from weapons that didn't even exist in current galactic armaments. The shields operated by manipulating space-time itself, creating barriers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the most revolutionary discovery had come from the team investigating the damaged predecessor gateway in the Outer Rim. Dr. Sarah Kim's Xenoarchaeology unit had not only repaired the ancient transportation system, but had successfully tested it with unmanned probes. The results had implications that would reshape humanity's entire approach to galactic expansion. The restored gateway could transport objects instantaneously across distances of up to 50 light-years, with perfect accuracy and no apparent energy cost beyond the initial activation sequence. More importantly, the team had discovered that the gateway network had been designed to be expandable. New gates could be constructed using human technology enhanced with predecessor principles, creating the foundation for a transportation network that could span the entire galaxy. Admiral Harrison, now serving as Supreme Commander of the Independent Human Territories, convened an emergency strategy session to address the implications of these technological breakthroughs. Representatives from every human colony participated via quantum communication, creating a virtual gathering that spanned dozens of star systems. "The situation has changed fundamentally," Harrison announced to the assembled colonial governors, military commanders, and scientific directors. 6 months ago, we were refugees building a new civilization from scratch. Today, we possess technology that makes us potentially the most powerful force in the galaxy." The strategic overview he presented would have seemed like science fiction just 2 years earlier. Human colonies were no longer isolated outposts struggling to establish basic infrastructure. They were becoming nodes in a network of unprecedented technological capability. Manufacturing facilities could produce materials that were superior to anything in Council space. Energy systems could power industrial complexes that dwarfed anything on Earth. Transportation networks could move entire fleets across galactic distances in the time it would normally take to cross a single star system. Governor Martinez of the New Terra colony raised the question that everyone was considering. "Admiral, what are the strategic implications of these developments? How should we respond to inevitable Council interest in our activities?" Harrison's answer reflected the transformation in humanity's galactic position. "The Council expelled us because they feared our expansion and our potential. They were right to be afraid, but for reasons they never imagined. We are no longer the species that pleaded for membership in their organization. We are becoming something that could challenge the entire structure of galactic civilization." The discussion that followed would define humanity's approach to the larger galaxy for decades to come. Some governors argued for a cautious approach, suggesting that humanity should continue to develop predecessor technology in secret while avoiding actions that might attract Council attention. Others advocated for a more aggressive strategy, proposing that humanity use its technological advantages to establish itself as a regional power that could eventually challenge Council authority. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, now serving as Director of Technological Development for the Independent Human Territories, presented the case for rapid expansion. The predecessor records indicate that this galaxy once supported a civilization far more advanced than anything that exists today. The current council species are essentially living in the ruins of a greater age, using technologies that are primitive compared to what the predecessors achieved. She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy with predecessor sites marked in blue and current council territories highlighted in red. We have discovered over 200 predecessor installations across our expanding colonial network. Each one contains technology that could advance human civilization by centuries. The Council controls less than 20% of the galaxy's habitable systems, and most of their territory contains no predecessor sites at all. The implications were clear. Humanity had accidentally gained access to the technological heritage of the galaxy's greatest civilization, while the Council species remained confined to regions that contained only the remnants of more recent, less advanced cultures. Admiral Harrison made the decision that would shape humanity's future relationship with the rest of galactic civilization. We will continue expanding and developing our technological capabilities, but we will no longer hide our achievements. The Council wanted to isolate us from their space. We will comply with that request by building our own space, one that surpasses anything they have ever imagined. The implementation of this new strategy began with the construction of humanity's first predecessor-enhanced starships. The vessels that emerged from human shipyards over the following months represented a quantum leap in military and civilian capabilities. Built with materials that were virtually indestructible and powered by energy systems that could operate for millennia without fuel, these ships could travel faster, fight harder, and explore deeper than anything in the known galaxy. The first major test of humanity's new capabilities came when a Council patrol encountered the UES Endeavor, a human exploration vessel that had been investigating predecessor sites near the border of Council space. The Council ship, a Vorthak heavy cruiser that represented the pinnacle of their military technology, moved to intercept the human vessel and order it to withdraw from the region. Captain James Morrison, commanding the Endeavor, found himself in a situation that would have been impossible just 2 years earlier. His ship was technically in violation of the Council's prohibition against human presence in their territory, but the Endeavor was so far advanced beyond the Vorthak cruiser that the encounter was barely worth considering a conflict. "Vorthak vessel, this is Captain Morrison of the UES Endeavor," he transmitted on standard diplomatic frequencies. "You are approaching a human archaeological survey operation. Please maintain a safe distance to avoid interfering with our research activities." The response from the Vorthak commander was predictably hostile. "Human vessel, you are in violation of the Council's exclusion decree. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Captain Morrison had been hopping to avoid a confrontation, but the Vorthak ship opened fire before he could attempt further diplomacy. The energy beams that struck the Endeavor would have been sufficient to destroy any conventional starship. Against a vessel protected by predecessor defensive technology, they might as well have been flashlights. The Endeavor's shields absorbed the attack without so much as fluctuating. Captain Morrison's response was measured and precise. A single pulse from the ship's defensive systems disabled the Vorthak cruiser's weapons and engines without causing permanent damage to the vessel or its crew. "Vorthak vessel, your weapons have been disabled for your own protection," Morrison transmitted. "You are free to withdraw and report this incident to your superiors. Please inform the Council that humanity's technological capabilities have advanced significantly since our departure from their territory." The encounter lasted less than 10 minutes, but its implications would resonate throughout Council space for months to come. A single human ship had effortlessly neutralized a Vorthak heavy cruiser, the same class of vessel that the Council relied upon to maintain order throughout their territory. The technological gap that had once favored the Council had been reversed so completely that their most powerful warships were now essentially obsolete. High Counselor Zephyrian convened an emergency session within days of receiving the Vorthak report. The chamber that had once been filled with confident speeches about containing the human threat was now heavy with the weight of a growing fear that their former solution had created an existential challenge to Council authority. "The humans have developed technology that we do not understand," Zephyrian announced to the assembled representatives. Their ships are demonstrating capabilities that exceed anything in our current arsenals. Their colonies are expanding at rates that suggest industrial capacity far beyond what any species has ever achieved. The Kelari representative, whose species had been among the most vocal supporters of human expulsion, raised the question that everyone was thinking. How is this possible? 18 months ago, they were a minor species with limited territory and conventional technology. How could they have advanced so far in such a short time? The answer would come from an unexpected source. The Altarian delegate, Zara, whose species had maintained secret diplomatic contact with human representatives, requested permission to address the assembly. What she revealed would fundamentally change the Council's understanding of the crisis they faced. "Honored counselors," Zara began, her translator rendering her words in the formal language of Council proceedings. "The Altarian Intelligence Service has been monitoring human activities in the Outer Rim. What we have discovered suggests that humanity's rapid advancement is not the result of their own technological development." The chamber fell silent as Zara activated a holographic display showing images captured by Altarian reconnaissance probes. The display revealed human colonies built around massive alien structures that clearly predated any known civilization. The humans have discovered extensive ruins of a previously unknown advanced species. These installations contain technology that appears to be tens of thousands of years old, far more advanced than anything in current galactic civilization. Humanity's rapid expansion has been driven by their systematic excavation and reverse engineering of this ancient technology. The implications hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. The Council had exiled humanity to the Outer Rim, precisely the region where the most advanced archaeological sites were located. In trying to isolate a potential threat, they had inadvertently given humanity access to the technological heritage of a civilization that could have conquered the entire galaxy. High Counselor Zephyrian's response reflected the magnitude of the crisis the Council now faced. "What you are describing suggests that humanity now has access to technology that could make them the dominant power in the galaxy. If they continue to develop these capabilities, they could challenge our authority throughout Council space." The debate that followed would determine whether the next phase of galactic history would be shaped by diplomacy or conflict. Some representatives argued for immediate military action to prevent humanity from developing their new capabilities further. Others suggested attempting to negotiate some form of technological sharing agreement that might benefit all Council species. But as the session continued, one fact became increasingly clear. The exile that was supposed to eliminate the threat posed by human expansion had instead created the foundation for a power that could reshape galactic civilization. The question was no longer how to contain humanity's growth, but how the established galactic order would respond to the emergence of a species that possessed the technological legacy of the galaxy's greatest ancient civilization. Fleet Admiral Rebecca Walsh stood in the command center of the UES Ascendant, humanity's first predecessor-enhanced dreadnought, watching as her tactical display showed the deployment of the largest human naval force in history. 2 years had passed since the first successful activation of predecessor technology, and humanity's transformation from exiled refugees to galactic power had accelerated beyond anyone's projections. The fleet now assembling in the Kepler system represented the culmination of that transformation. 300 ships built with materials that defied conventional physics, powered by energy systems that could operate indefinitely, and armed with weapons that could crack planets. "Admiral, all fleet elements report ready for departure," announced Commander Torres, her tactical officer. "The gateway network is fully operational. We can have the entire fleet at any target in Council space within 6 hours." Walsh nodded, feeling the weight of the decision that lay before her. The reconnaissance reports from the border regions had been escalating for months. Council fleets were massing near the boundaries of independent human territory, their intentions unclear but their posture increasingly aggressive. Intelligence suggested that the Council was preparing for some form of military action, possibly a preemptive strike designed to prevent humanity from developing their predecessor technology further. The irony was not lost on her. The Council had exiled humanity to prevent them from becoming a threat. Now, faced with the reality of what humanity had become, they were considering the very military action that their original decision had been designed to avoid. Status report on the colonial defenses, Walsh asked, reviewing the strategic overview that showed the extent of human expansion across nearly 200 star systems. All major colonies are now protected by predecessor defensive grids, replied Commander Singh from the Strategic Planning Station. The shield generators can protect entire planets from orbital bombardment, and the automated defense platforms are equipped with weapons that can engage targets at ranges exceeding 50 light-years. The transformation of human space had been as dramatic as the technological advances that made it possible. What had begun as a handful of refugee settlements had evolved into a network of worlds that individually possessed industrial capacity greater than some entire council member species. The Gateway Network allowed instant communication and transportation across the entire territory, creating a unified command structure that could coordinate activities on a galactic scale. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, now serving as Director of Strategic Technology Development, joined Walsh in the command center via holographic projection from the primary research facility on Kepler 442c. Admiral, I wanted to brief you on our latest discoveries before you proceed with the deployment. Walsh gestured for her to continue. What have your teams found, Doctor? Kane's expression reflected both excitement and concern. We've successfully decoded another section of the predecessor Central Archive. The information we've uncovered changes our understanding of galactic history and our current strategic situation. The holographic display shifted to show a detailed map of the galaxy as it had existed 50,000 years ago. The predecessor empire had indeed controlled vast regions of space, but the archive revealed that they had not been the galaxy's only advanced civilization. 3 other species had achieved similar levels of technological development, creating a complex political landscape of competing powers that had ultimately led to the catastrophic wars that destroyed them all. The critical discovery, Kane continued, is that the predecessors didn't disappear entirely. According to these records, several of their colony fleets survived the final war by fleeing to other galaxies. More importantly, they left behind automated systems designed to preserve their technology until a worthy successor species emerged. Walsh felt a chill as she realized the implications. Are you saying that our access to predecessor technology wasn't accidental? The evidence suggests that humanity's expansion into predecessor territory triggered dormant monitoring systems that have been evaluating our species for potential succession. We haven't just been reverse engineering ancient technology. We've been participating in a selection process that was designed to identify the next inheritors of galactic civilization. The revelation fundamentally changed humanity's strategic position. They were not simply scavengers making use of abandoned ruins. They were potentially the chosen successors to the greatest civilization in galactic history, with access to technology and knowledge that had been deliberately preserved for this moment. Doctor, what are the implications for our current situation with the Council? Kane's answer would shape humanity's approach to the growing crisis. The predecessor archives contain detailed records of their conflicts with less advanced species that feared their expansion. The pattern is remarkably similar to our current situation with the Council. Advanced species facing inferior but numerous opponents who band together out of fear and desperation. She manipulated the display to show battle records from the ancient wars. The predecessors ultimately lost because they underestimated the determination of their enemies and overestimated their own technological advantages. Superior technology alone wasn't sufficient to overcome the combined forces of the entire galaxy when those forces were driven by existential fear. Walsh absorbed this information, understanding that humanity faced a choice that would determine not only their own future, but the future of galactic civilization. They could attempt to avoid conflict, hoping that the Council would eventually accept their transformation. Or they could take proactive action to ensure their security and establish humanity as the dominant power in the galaxy. Admiral, Commander Torres interrupted, we're receiving urgent communications from our border monitoring stations. Council fleets are moving toward the Vega system in force. Intelligence estimates at least 500 ships from 12 different species. The moment of decision had arrived earlier than expected. The Council was not simply posturing or attempting to intimidate humanity into compliance. They were launching what appeared to be a coordinated military assault designed to cripple human expansion before it could proceed further. Walsh activated the fleet-wide communication system that would carry her voice to every human ship and installation within 50 light-years. "This is Admiral Walsh to all units of the Independent Human Territories Defense Force. Council fleets are approaching our territory with apparent hostile intent. All defensive systems are to activate immediately. Civilian populations are to implement emergency protocols. Military forces will respond according to Contingency Plan 7. Contingency Plan 7 had been developed by human strategic planners as their response to a full-scale Council assault. Rather than attempting to defend static positions, the plan called for the immediate deployment of humanity's mobile forces to strategic positions throughout Council space. The Gateway Network would allow human fleets to appear simultaneously in dozens of Council systems, presenting their enemies with a multi-front conflict that would strain their coordination and logistics beyond the breaking point. "All fleet elements prepare for immediate deployment through the Gateway Network," Walsh commanded. "Target assignments are being transmitted now. Remember that we are not the aggressors in this conflict, but we will not allow fear and prejudice to destroy what we have built." The execution of Contingency Plan 7 began within minutes of Walsh's order. Human fleets that had been positioned throughout the Outer Rim suddenly vanished through gateway portals, emerging simultaneously in Council space in a coordinated operation that demonstrated capabilities the alien species had never imagined possible. The UES Endeavour materialized in the heart of the Vorthak home system, its predecessor-enhanced sensors mapping every military installation and defensive position within seconds of arrival. Captain Morrison, who had commanded the ship during its first encounter with Council forces, found himself facing a strategic target that represented the heart of Vorthak military power. "Vorthak Defense Command, this is Captain Morrison of the Independent Human Territories Defense Force," he transmitted on all frequencies. "Your species has participated in an unprovoked assault on human territory. We are here to demonstrate the consequences of that decision." The Vorthak response was immediate and overwhelming. Every defense platform in the system opened fire on the human vessel, concentrating enough firepower to destroy a conventional fleet. The energy beams and projectile weapons struck the Endeavour's predecessor shields without effect, their destructive force absorbed and redirected through dimensional manipulation systems that operated beyond Vorthak comprehension. Morrison's response was measured but devastating. The Endeavour's primary weapon system, based on predecessor stellar manipulation technology, fired once. The energy beam, invisible to conventional sensors, struck the primary star of the Vorthak system and induced a controlled solar flare that sent electromagnetic pulses throughout the entire star system. Every electronic system in Vorthak space shut down simultaneously. Defense platforms went dark, communication networks failed, and the massive orbital habitats that housed billions of Vorthak citizens lost power and life support. The entire civilization was rendered helpless in the space of seconds, completely dependent on human mercy for survival. "Vorthak Defense Command," Morrison transmitted, his ship's communication system apparently unaffected by the electromagnetic pulse that had crippled everything else in the system. "Your defensive systems have been disabled. Your civilians are in immediate danger of life support failure. We are prepared to restore power to your essential systems, but only if your government agrees to immediate and unconditional ceasefire." Similar scenes played out across Council space as human fleets demonstrated capabilities that made resistance seem futile. The Kalari home system found itself facing a human squadron that had neutralized their entire defensive grid without firing a shot, using predecessor technology to simply turn off their weapon systems. The Etherian energy beings discovered that humans had developed countermeasures specifically designed to disrupt their non-corporeal existence, essentially trapping them in containment fields that prevented them from accessing their technological infrastructure. High Counselor Zephyrian, monitoring the systematic dismantling of Council defenses from the Emergency Command Center on the Council homeworld, faced a situation that no galactic leader had ever confronted. An entire civilization was being defeated not through massive destruction, but through the demonstration of technological superiority so complete that resistance was meaningless. "How many systems have they hit simultaneously?" he asked the military coordinator who was attempting to compile reports from across Council space. Preliminary reports suggest over 40 systems. High Counselor. They appear to have targeted every major military installation and government center simultaneously. The coordination required for this operation exceeds anything in our strategic planning. Zephyrian realized that the Council was facing the same choice that had confronted every species that had opposed the predecessors 50,000 years ago. They could continue fighting and risk the complete destruction of their civilizations, or they could accept that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently in humanity's favor. The communication that arrived from Admiral Walsh was transmitted simultaneously to every government center in Council space, its message clear and uncompromising. Leaders of the Galactic Council, your forces are currently moving against independent human territory with apparent hostile intent. We have responded by demonstrating our capability to neutralize your entire military infrastructure without causing unnecessary civilian casualties. Walsh's image appeared on screens across Council space, her expression calm but determined. Humanity does not seek conquest or destruction. We seek only the right to exist and develop our civilization without interference. However, we will not allow fear and prejudice to be used as justification for unprovoked aggression. The ultimatum that followed would reshape the political structure of the galaxy. All Council forces will withdraw from human territory immediately. Any further military action against human interests will be met with decisive response. The Council has 48 hours to decide whether the future of galactic civilization will be shaped by cooperation or conflict. As Council leaders struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the crisis confronting them, humanity continued its expansion and development with the confidence of a species that had discovered its true place in the galaxy. The exile that was supposed to contain their threat had instead led them to the inheritance of power beyond anything the current galactic order could imagine. The question was no longer whether humanity would become a major galactic power. The question was whether the existing civilization could adapt to a new reality where the species they had once dismissed as primitive refugees had become the inheritors of the galaxy's greatest technological legacy. In research facilities across human space, scientists continued their work with predecessor technology, unlocking capabilities that would soon make their current advantages seem modest by comparison. The transformation that had begun with exile from the Council was accelerating towards something that would fundamentally change the nature of galactic civilization itself. The Council had 48 hours to decide how they would respond to this new reality. But regardless of their choice, the age of human ascendancy had already begun. 10 years had passed since the Council's 48-hour ultimatum expired, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to the civilization that had once cast humanity into exile. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now serving as the first president of the Terran Imperium, stood before the newly constructed Senate chamber on New Terra, addressing representatives from over 500 human worlds and 57 former Council species that had chosen to join humanity's expanding confederation. The transformation had been as swift as it was complete. Within a year of demonstrating their overwhelming technological superiority, humanity had faced a choice that would define galactic civilization for millennia to come. They could rule through fear and force, as many advanced species had done throughout history, or they could build something unprecedented, a truly voluntary association of worlds based on cooperation rather than dominance. 10 years ago, we were exiles, Sarah began, her words carried by communication networks that spanned the entire galaxy. We were cast out by species who feared our potential and refused to accept us as equals. Today, we stand not as conquerors, but as partners in the greatest expansion of knowledge and prosperity that this galaxy has ever seen. The Senate chamber itself was a monument to human engineering enhanced by predecessor technology. The building existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing representatives from every member world to participate directly despite being separated by thousands of light years. The architecture incorporated materials that shifted their properties based on the emotional state of the assembly, creating an environment that literally reflected the mood of galactic democracy. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, now the director of predecessor studies for the entire Imperium, had spent the decade since the crisis working with teams of scientists from dozens of species to unlock the full potential of the ancient technology. Her discoveries had not only revolutionized human civilization, but had fundamentally changed the nature of existence for every species willing to embrace the new possibilities. The predecessor archives contained more than just advanced technology, Kane explained to the Assembly during her annual report. They contained a blueprint for a form of civilization that transcends the limitations that have constrained galactic development for millennia. The achievements of the past decade justified her optimism. Disease had been essentially eliminated throughout Imperium space through biotechnology that could repair genetic damage and enhance immune systems beyond anything nature had ever produced. Scarcity was becoming a historical curiosity, as manufacturing systems could convert any form of matter into any desired product with perfect efficiency. Transportation networks allowed instant travel between any 2 points in the galaxy, making interstellar distance irrelevant for commerce, communication, and cultural exchange. Most remarkably, the Imperium had solved the problem that had destroyed the predecessors themselves: unity without uniformity. Instead of forcing conquered species to abandon their cultures and traditions, humanity had created a system that celebrated diversity while providing common frameworks for cooperation. Vorthak agricultural worlds supplied food to Kelari research stations, while Etherian energy beings collaborated with human engineers on projects that neither species could have accomplished alone. Admiral Harrison, now serving as Defense Minister for the Imperium, presented the security overview that demonstrated how thoroughly the balance of power had shifted. The Imperium now encompasses over 600 star systems, with a combined population approaching 2 trillion sentient beings. Our defensive capabilities could protect the entire galaxy from any conceivable external threat, while our exploration fleets are establishing contact with civilizations in neighboring galaxies. The numbers were staggering compared to humanity's modest presence in Council space just a decade earlier. The Gateway network now connected every inhabited system in the galaxy, with new gates being constructed at a rate of 50 per month. The industrial capacity of Imperium space exceeded the combined output of all previous galactic civilizations, powered by energy systems that drew directly from the quantum vacuum and limited only by the imagination of their operators. But the most significant achievement was not technological or military. It was the creation of a political system that actually worked on a galactic scale. The Terran Senate included representatives not only from human colonies, but from every species that had chosen to join the Imperium voluntarily. Former enemies worked together on projects that benefited their entire civilizations, while traditional rivals found common ground in the shared opportunities that predecessor technology provided. The Altarian delegate, Zara, now serving as deputy president of the Imperium, addressed the Assembly on behalf of the non-human members. Our species spent millennia trapped in patterns of conflict and competition that prevented us from achieving our true potential. The humans offered us something we had never imagined: the opportunity to grow beyond what we thought was possible. Her words carried special weight because the Altarians had been among humanity's earliest supporters during the dark days of exile and expulsion. Their advocacy for cooperation over conquest had helped shape the Imperium's inclusive approach to galactic governance. The Council feared human expansion because they saw it as a threat to their own dominance, Zara continued. They were correct that humanity would change everything, but they were wrong about what that change would mean. Instead of replacing one form of oppression with another, the humans created something entirely new: a civilization where every species could contribute their unique strengths to shared goals. The success stories that followed her speech demonstrated the reality of that cooperation. Vorthak agricultural scientists had worked with human biotechnology experts to develop crop species that could grow in previously uninhabitable environments, opening thousands of new worlds to settlement. Kelari aquatic engineers had collaborated with predecessor manufacturing systems to create underwater cities that housed billions of beings in perfect harmony with their oceanic environments. Etherian energy specialists had helped human physicists unlock new dimensions of space-time manipulation that made faster-than-light travel seem primitive by comparison. High Counselor Zephyrian, now serving as the representative for the former Council homeworld, rose to address the Assembly. His presence in the Terran Senate was perhaps the most symbolic representation of how completely the galaxy had been transformed. The leader who had once cast humanity into exile was now working within their system of government, contributing his species' ancient wisdom to the challenges of governing a galactic empire. "I must speak a difficult truth," Zephyrian began, his translated words carrying the weight of personal and political redemption. "The Council made the greatest mistake in galactic history when we exiled humanity from our space. We acted from fear rather than wisdom, choosing to eliminate a perceived threat rather than embracing the potential for mutual growth." His acknowledgement of the Council's error was more than diplomatic courtesy. It represented a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization understood power and progress. The old model of established species maintaining dominance over newcomers had been replaced by a dynamic system where innovation and cooperation were valued above traditional hierarchies. "But perhaps," Zephyrian continued, "that mistake was necessary. If humanity had remained within Council space, constrained by our limitations and prejudices, they might never have discovered their true potential. The exile that we intended as punishment became the foundation for a renaissance that has benefited every species in the galaxy." The irony was not lost on anyone present. The Council's attempt to preserve their existing order had led directly to its complete transformation. By forcing humanity to seek its own path, they had inadvertently created the conditions that allowed for the discovery of predecessor technology and the subsequent emergence of the Terran Imperium. President Chen concluded the session by announcing the Imperium's next great project, the construction of intergalactic gateways that would allow expansion beyond their current galaxy. Predecessor technology had revealed that the universe contained billions of galaxies, many of which harbored civilizations that had never been contacted by any outside force. "The vision that guides us is simple," she explained to the assembled representatives. "Every sentient species deserves the opportunity to reach its full potential. Every civilization should have the chance to contribute its unique perspective to the greater community of minds that spans the universe." The project she outlined would dwarf even humanity's transformation of their own galaxy. Exploration fleets would venture into neighboring galaxies, making contact with alien civilizations that had never imagined the existence of life beyond their own stars. The technological and cultural exchange that would result could accelerate the development of the entire universe by millions of years. Dr. Kane presented the technical specifications that made such ambitions realistic rather than fantastical. "We have successfully decoded the predecessor files relating to universal exploration and expansion. Their technology was not limited to single galaxies. They had established communication and transportation networks that spanned the entire visible universe before their civilization fell." The scope of what the predecessors had achieved was still being discovered. They had not simply ruled one galaxy. They had been building a universal civilization that would have included every form of intelligent life in existence. Their destruction had set back the development of the universe by 50,000 years, but their technological legacy provided the foundation for resuming that interrupted progress. Admiral Harrison outlined the military implications of universal expansion. "Our defensive capabilities are now sufficient to protect not only our own galaxy, but to serve as guardians for any civilization that wishes to join our confederation. We will not impose our system on unwilling species, but we will ensure that no civilization falls victim to the kind of fear and prejudice that once threatened our own survival." The Terran Imperium had become something unprecedented in universal history, a voluntary association of civilizations that spanned an entire galaxy and was preparing to expand across the cosmos itself. The species that had once been exiled for being too aggressive and ambitious had built the most inclusive and cooperative civilization that had ever existed. As the Senate session concluded and representatives began returning to their home worlds through the Gateway Network, Sarah Chen remained in the chamber, contemplating the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. 10 years ago, she had stood before the Galactic Council as a supplicant, pleading for her species' right to exist as equals among the stars. Today, she led an empire that offered every sentient being in the universe the opportunity to transcend their limitations and reach for greatness. The exile that was intended to isolate humanity had instead freed them to discover their destiny as inheritors of the galaxy's greatest technological legacy. The Council's fears about human expansion had been proven correct, but in ways they never could have imagined. Humanity had indeed changed everything, but instead of destroying galactic civilization, they had transformed it into something greater than any previous generation had thought possible. The message that went out from New Terra to civilizations throughout the universe carried the same spirit that had guided humanity through exile, discovery, and transformation. We reach across the void between stars and galaxies to offer partnership to any species that seeks to grow beyond the limitations of their birth. Together, we can build a future worthy of the potential that exists within every thinking mind. The age of isolation is ending. The age of universal cooperation has begun. Across the galaxy and beyond, that message was received by civilizations that had spent millennia believing they were alone in the universe. The species that had been cast out for threatening the established order had become the architects of a new order that would reshape existence itself on a cosmic scale. The Terran Imperium was no longer just humanity's answer to exile. It had become the foundation for the universe's answer to the ancient dream of unity among the stars.